in the fog-draped town of Thistlewood. Tales spoke of the lamplighter ghost, a specter whose presence was felt each time the gas street lamps flickered in the night. Locals claimed to hear faint footsteps, like old leather boots padding along the cobblestones, followed by the soft click of an ancient match igniting. Some nights, the lamps would blaze brighter, casting unsettling shadows that seemed to move on their own. Other nights, they would dim, blanketing the streets in an eerie darkness that left only the whisper of footsteps lingering in the air. As the story went, the ghost was the spirit of Henry Lowe, a lamplighter who disappeared over a century ago under mysterious circumstances. Henry had been a quiet man, known for his loyalty to the town, but one evening, as the townsfolk awoke to find all the lamps unlit, Henry was nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled. Some whispered that he had been taken by the spirits of Thistlewood's ancient cemetery, while others believed he'd meddled with dark magic, seeking something beyond the mortal realm. Now, it was said that Henry returned each night to light the lamps he had once tended, but those who ventured close enough claimed to see him, a gaunt figure in tattered clothing, his eyes hollow yet blazing with a light that matched the lamps he tended. And if one dared to follow him, the footsteps would stop, leaving the follower alone in the silent streets, feeling as if eyes watched them from the shadows. Many tried to uncover the truth of Henry's disappearance. Some explored the depths of the cemetery, while others searched his abandoned home. All they found were half-burned candles, strange symbols scrawled on the walls, and faint traces of soot smeared in the shape of an unlit lamp. One night, a young woman named Eliza, who had heard tales of the ghost all her life, decided to follow the specter through the streets. She watched as the lamplighter moved from one post to the next, her breath clouding in the chilling air as she kept her distance. But when he reached the last lamp, he stopped and turned to face her. His mouth opened, though no words came out, only a faint whisper, a voice not his own. "Stay away," it hissed, "or you will light the final lamp." Then, with a flicker, he vanished into the shadows, leaving the lamps burning, their light casting twisted shadows in every direction. No one ever saw Eliza again, though on certain nights another set of footsteps could be heard alongside the ghostly lamplighter, a faint shadow trailing him in the dim light. The townsfolk never speak of her, and no one dares to follow the ghost of Henry Lowe ever again. A year had passed since Eliza's disappearance, and the townsfolk of Thistlewood grew wary of lingering near the street lamps at dusk. No one dared speak of Eliza, and yet, every night, Henry's ghostly footsteps could still be heard in the narrow streets, now joined by a faint second set that seemed to echo just behind him. One foggy evening, a group of travelers arrived in Thistlewood. Among them was a scholar named Frederick Graves, who had spent years studying paranormal phenomena. He was drawn to Thistlewood by the legend of the lamplighter ghost, and was determined to unravel its mystery. Ignoring the townsfolk's warnings, he took to the streets that night, intent on witnessing the ghost for himself. As midnight approached, Frederick heard the unmistakable click of the ghostly match. The lamps flared to life one by one, casting their dim glow through the thick mist. As he watched, a shadowy figure emerged from the fog, moving from one lamppost to the next. But there was something different this time. Another figure lingered close behind him, a wraith-like form with wild, unseeing eyes. Frederick's heart pounded as he followed the spectral pair, keeping a safe distance. The ghostly lamplighter and his eerie companion continued down the cobblestone path, their presence marked by an unnatural chill that seeped into Frederick's bones. But as they reached the final lamp, the lamplighter turned, his hollow eyes locking onto Frederick with a gaze so intense it seemed to pierce through to his very soul. The second figure, the one Frederick now realized was Eliza, turned as well. Her face was a twisted mask of despair, and her hand lifted slowly, pointing directly at him. "Do you seek the light that never dies?" she whispered, her voice a hollow echo. Frederick felt compelled to step closer, even as dread clawed at him. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Without warning, the lamplighter raised his arm, and the last lamp dimmed until it was no more than a feeble glow. Shadows began to writhe and creep, taking shape around Frederick, forming a circle that trapped him within their spectral grasp. The darkness pressed in, cold and suffocating. As he heard Eliza's fading voice, "You will never leave the light once you have seen its secret." With that, Frederick's vision blurred, and the world around him vanished. When he awoke, he found himself alone on the cobbled street, surrounded by silence. The next night, the townsfolk whispered of a third pair of footsteps that could be heard in Thistlewood, and the lamps burned with a strange, unnatural glow. Now, those who listened closely claimed to hear faint, desperate whispers mingling with the footsteps, whispers warning others to stay away from the light. Yet, one question lingered, unanswered, as a dark thrill settled over the town. Asterisk, what had Frederick seen in that final light? And why did he still wander the streets, as if waiting for someone to follow him? Asterisk, as the months passed, Thistlewood's nights became darker, the lamplight growing weaker, its flicker more erratic. Yet, the eerie procession of footsteps continued, three distinct sets now, moving in a chilling rhythm that never seemed to end. The townsfolk began locking their doors earlier, their faces pale with fear at even the faintest whisper of wind outside. But the rumors never ceased. Some spoke of strange shadows now visible just beyond the lamp's failing glow, shapes that writhed and shifted, forming impossible figures before melting into the fog. Others said they could hear faint, tortured whispers in the dead of night, voices that pleaded for release or whispered of a curse no one understood. One evening, a stranger arrived, a priest named Father Edmund, drawn by rumors of the haunted lamplighter and the soul said to be trapped in Thistlewood's endless twilight. He believed he could set these lost spirits free. The townsfolk were hesitant, but their fear of the growing darkness pushed them to allow him his attempt. As the clock struck midnight, Father Edmund ventured alone into the fog-shrouded streets, clutching a silver cross and a lantern burning with a holy flame. His footsteps echoed ominously as he approached the first lamppost. He lifted his lantern to shine into the gloom, and in its glow he saw them, the lamplighter, Eliza, and Frederick, their faces hollow and gaunt, their eyes vacant yet filled with a strange, lingering sorrow. The lamplighter raised his hand as if to shield his face from the light, his lips moving soundlessly. Father Edmund stepped closer, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he heard the ghost speak. "Turn back, Father," the lamplighter whispered, his voice an eerie rasp that barely pierced the silence. This light was never meant for the living. Father Edmund felt a shiver creep down his spine, but he forced himself to continue. "I've come to release you," he said, lifting his cross. "In the name of the holy light, I command you to find peace." The lamplighter's hollow eyes flickered, and Eliza and Frederick turned to him, their faces twisted with an unnatural fear. The air grew colder, and the shadows that lingered in the fog began to writhe, as if something darker and far older was awakening. "You don't understand," Eliza's voice echoed, her eyes wide with terror. "It's not us that you must fear." A deep, guttural sound erupted from the darkness, a low, rumbling growl that shook the cobblestones beneath Father Edmund's feet. The priest's lantern flickered, and in that brief flash of darkness, he saw a towering figure looming behind the ghosts, its form twisted and monstrous, its eyes burning like embers. A feeling of dread flooded Father Edmund as he realized what he was seeing. The light wasn't simply haunted, it was a doorway, a beacon that had bound these souls and kept something terrible at bay. And now, his attempt to set them free had weakened that boundary. With a final, desperate whisper, Frederick's voice broke through the darkness. "Run, Father, before the last light goes out." But it was too late. The lamps along the street dimmed one by one, their flames snuffed out by an unseen force. The fog thickened, swallowing the street in pitch-black shadows as the growl intensified, rising into a deafening roar. The townsfolk awoke the next morning to find Father Edmund's silver cross, abandoned on the cobblestones, scorched and twisted, the last sign of his presence. And that night, as the fog rolled in, a fourth set of footsteps joined the procession, echoing through the streets of Thistlewood. Now, none dared walk the streets after dark, for they knew that with each fading flame, something darker waited in the shadows, growing closer with every step. And one question haunted their dreams. Asterisk, what would happen when the last light finally died? Asterisk, the townsfolk of Thistlewood lived in growing terror, huddling behind their doors each night as the lamplighter's procession continued, now with mournful shadows wandering the fog-filled streets. Each evening, the lamps dimmed sooner, their feeble light barely pushing back the creeping darkness. Thistlewood had become a place of eternal dusk, where no warmth or brightness could last, and whispers filled every empty alley. One stormy night, as the rain poured down in sheets, a young child named Sarah, who knew nothing of the ghostly legends, slipped out of her bed and into the street. She clutched a small, worn doll, her eyes wide with curiosity as she followed the flickering lamps. Unaware of the danger that lurked, she had been restless, drawn by the faint whispers and wandering voices that she thought might belong to the long-lost souls she had heard about in whispers from her parents. By the time her parents realized she was missing, she was deep within the fog, her small form nearly invisible in the relentless rain. They called for her frantically, but the mist swallowed their voices, leaving them to stand helplessly at the edge of the square, staring into the shrouded streets with silent dread. Through the hazy glow, Sarah saw the figures of the lamplighter, Eliza, Frederick, and Father Edmund. She approached them, unafraid, gazing up at their sorrowful faces with innocent curiosity. "Are you lost, little one?" The lamplighter's ghostly voice rasped, his hollow eyes meeting hers. "No," she replied softly, clutching her doll tighter. "I heard you calling." The lamplighter knelt before her, his face etched with something between sadness and longing. He reached out as if to touch her face, but his hand passed through her as though he were made of smoke. Before she could say more, the darkness that lurked just beyond the faint light of the street lamps began to stir, as if something terrible sensed her presence. The lamplighter, his eyes wide with fear, turned to the others, his hollow voice trembling. "We must keep her safe," he whispered. "One last chance to keep the light alive." The other spirits surrounded Sarah, their forms flickering, their faces twisted with despair. Together, they raised their hands to the sky, a silent plea to the heavens above, as if begging for a power they had lost long ago. But the darkness surged forward, consuming the final flickers of light. One by one, the lamps died, their flames smothered as a wave of shadow poured into the street, drowning out the spirits and everything around them. The townsfolk watched helplessly as the last lamp went dark, plunging Thistlewood into a silence so complete it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. The next morning, the mist finally cleared, revealing empty streets bathed in an eerie, gray light. The townsfolk searched desperately, calling out for Sarah, hoping she had somehow survived. But all they found was her small, worn doll lying alone on the cobblestones, its face turned skyward as if pleading to the now empty heavens. The footsteps were gone. The lamplighter, Eliza, Frederick, and Father Edmund had vanished, taking the darkness with them. But so, too, had the last traces of light in Thistlewood. The street lamps never flickered again, their fires extinguished for eternity. And each night, as shadows crept through the empty town, a deep sorrow settled over Thistlewood, a town cursed by a lingering darkness that no dawn could ever chase away.